to my kitchen. So if you've been following the channel for a while, you might know that one of my favorite things to make are gum paste flowers, and a trend that I'm loving at the moment is adding these onto hoops to go onto your cakes. So I thought for this week's video tutorial I would show you how I made this pretty floral hoop. Also, don't forget, if you haven't already, you can subscribe to the Cake Spannings YouTube channel. You can also hit the notification bell next to the subscribe button, and this will just alert you every time a new video is uploaded. Okay, let's get started. So in order to create the floral hoop, I've just got this gold round metal ring. Now this one measures 15 centimeters across, or around 6 inches, and I will put a link in the description below to where I got this from. Now this one is fairly small and is going to have the 6-inch cake behind it. So I plan to add 3 roses, some little flower buds, and some greenery around the edge. So the first thing that I need to do is make my flowers. Okay, so for my first flower, I'm just going to create a small rose. Now for this one, I've just coloured some gum paste or some floral paste in a light dusky pink colour. So I've just used a light pink food gel and just added a tiny hint of blue just to give me that dusky colour. Now the first thing that I've got is my flower bud, and I just want to attach this to my wire. Now ordinarily I would just create a loop at the bottom that I thread into the end of my flower just to give me more stability. Take a piece of wire, fold it in half, and just wind it around a few times. And what this will mean is once we've created our rose, I can use these 2 sections to wrap around the hoop. So I'm just going to heat that up and just push that into the end of my flower bud. The 2 cutters that I'll be using for this rose are, the first one just measures 1 inch across, and the next one is around 1.5 inches. I've just made my flower bud so it's the same size as my first petal cutter. Now I will put a link in the description below to a full video on how I make my roses. So for my first row, I've just got one of the smaller petals just wrapping itself around that flower bud. For the next layer, I've just added 2 of my petals, or you can add 3 depending on how you want the center to look. I then added another 3, followed by another 3 of the smaller ones which slightly start to open out, and then we've got the start of the larger petals. So the first row is a row of 5. Now I want to keep this rose fairly small so I can tuck it just in the side of the David Austin rose that I'm going to make. So I'm just adding 1 more layer of the larger petals, and this time I'm adding 6. So there I have my first rose. Now I've just bent over one of the wires just so I can hang it up to dry while we make the rest of our flowers. Now for the slightly larger David Austin rose, I've just coloured some of my floral paste in a slightly darker dusky pink just to complement the lighter rose that's going to sit next to it. Now for this one, I'm just going to use 3 sizes of petal cutters. So I've got the 2 that I used for the rose and one that is slightly larger. Now I'm going to go ahead and make my David Austin rose. I will put a link in the description below to a full tutorial showing exactly how to make them. So once I've created all 5 of the center buds, I'm just going to bring those together, use some floral tape and go all the way down the length of the wires. Now I'm going to stop with 6 petals around the edge, and this is just so that my David Austin rose doesn't get too big for my gold hoop. So there we have the David Austin rose. The next thing that I want to do is just create some foliage to go around the outside. I've just got a green floral paste here for some rose leaves and a slightly lighter one which I'm going to use to create some eucalyptus leaves. So starting with some of the darker green, I'm just using my PME veining board. I'm just going to roll that out so that I've got this slightly raised area on the back. I've then got a set of leaf cutters and also a rose leaf veiner. So I'm just going to cut one of my leaves out, take a small piece of wire, just pop the end of that into some edible glue and just thread that through. I can then place that on my veiner and just close that up. Now I'm just going to lay these on my surface, just bringing up the edges of those so that they don't dry flat. Now I'm going to go ahead and make a few of these in different sizes. Okay, so now all my rose leaves have been left to dry. I'm now ready to add some colour. So I've just got some petal dust. I'm using an apple green and a foliage green, and I've got a tiny amount of a lemon yellow, and just dust some of that colour on. So I've got a slightly lighter green and a slightly darker one run around the edges, and just add a small amount of yellow just up that centre. Just mix that in with the green, they all blend together. So I'm going to go ahead and add some colour to all of my leaves. Once all my leaves have been coloured, it's now time to prepare them to add to the hoop. I'm going to have the larger flowers in the centre, but I want some leaves coming up from the side. First thing that I want to do is just trim down some of my slightly shorter ones. So I'm leaving it around 2 inches, but keeping my main stem as the longest one. I'm then going to take some of my floral tape and just wet the end of my fingers, just so it will start to stick to itself. Starting just under my leaf, I'm just going to start wind that round, just bringing it down. Once I've come down about 1/2 centimetre, I'm just going to take another one of those leaves, just bend that out slightly, tuck that in, start to wind. Once I've come down a little bit further, I'm just going to do exactly the same and just add another one in. Now, once I get to the bottom, I'm just going to pull that floral tape away, pulling the leaves into place. Now I'm going to make a few of these and just keep a few of my leaves just to one side so that I can add these singly around some of my roses. Okay, so for the eucalyptus leaves, I'm just going to use some of the lighter green. I've then got 2 leaf cutters. Now this one just measures around 1 inch across, and this one is just over 1 centimetre. Now it's got a point on one side, which is the bottom of the leaf, so where it connects to our wire, and there's just a small dip in the top. Now for this, I'm just going to use the same veiner as I did for our rose petals, and this one just has a slight veining pattern that just runs straight up. So I'm going to roll the green out onto my veining board. I can then take a piece of wire and just thread that on the end where we've got the point, just pinching that slightly. Now I'm going to keep them quite flat in order to dry them. You may just want to turn the edges slightly so they're not all completely flat, but I'm going to go ahead and make a selection of the 2 different sizes. So just as I had my rose leaves, I've now got my eucalyptus leaves. So these have all dried, and I'm going to add some colour to these. Now I've got the same apple green and foliage green, but I've also got some eucalyptus edible tin. So I really like the light green that these are already, but I'm just going to take some of that eucalyptus colour and just pop this towards the top of the leaf. Take some of that slightly darker green and just pop this on the bottom. Now for this one, a wire that was covered in white rather than the green. So I'm just going to bring some of that colour down just onto that white, and I'm going to do this for all of my leaves. I just find by adding a range of colours onto these leaves, it just really brings them to life, and it also picks out the veins that we've put in. Okay, so once we've got all of our leaves coloured, I'm going to do the same as I did with the rose leaves and just add some of these together. And I'm going to start with one at the top. So this is the smaller one of the 2. So I'm going to keep the long stem and just trim the others off slightly. Now again, I'm just going to use my floral tape. So I'm going to wet that end and start winding it around. Now once I've come down about 1 centimetre, I'm going to take my next leaf, bend this one round, but instead of tucking it right in, I'm going to leave about 1/2 centimetre out. Now once I've come down a little way, I'm going to add another one in and just continue this all the way down. Now eucalyptus leaves tend to remain quite flat but just come down this centre line. So there we have our spray of eucalyptus leaves. Okay, so the first thing that I've got to add onto my metal hoop are my eucalyptus leaves. I've then got my rose leaves. I've got a light pink rose and also a smaller rose. I've got my dusky pink David Austin rose, and lastly I've just made some flower buds. I'll also put a link in the description below showing you how I made these. Okay, so I've got my 15cm gold metal hoop here. Now you can just leave it like this and start attaching the flowers, but I just like to make mine slightly more secure so that I can attach it actually into my cake. So I've just got a small length of wire. So this one is an 18 gauge wire. I then got a very small PME pick just to make it nice and food safe. So I'm going to start wrapping that piece of metal around, and once that's nice and secure in place, wind that around itself. Use some of my metal tools just to make sure that's nice and secure. I can then trim that down so that will then push into my kit. So we've now got this at the bottom. It's time to decide where my flowers are going to go. So I've got my 3 roses and I'm going to have these coming off slightly off center. I also want to have some of my leaves just coming up. First thing to do is just start bending some of those leaves round just so it will follow the edge of your hoop. Now I'm going to start to apply these with some more of my floral tape and just start to wrap that around. And they're going to do the same on the other side. So we've got our 2 sprays of eucalyptus. The next thing I'm going to add is the larger rose here, just so I can get the spacing right on the 2 sides. So I'm going to take my David Austin rose, and because I want this all slightly off center, it's going to go this side of flower pick. Now this one just has 1 stem, so I want to wrap this around my hoop. Now I'm just resting the back of my rose just onto that hoop, and this one is actually going to rest on to the base of my cake. So I'm just going in on the side just above our David Austin rose, adding some of those rose leaves and our flower buds. I'm just going to come down to the bottom and trim off the excess wires. So here we have our hoop so far. Now I'm ready to add my rose on to this side. Now the great thing about this one is we have the 2 ends of wire. So I'm going to work out where I want it, but thread the hoop through the center. I can then turn my hoop over and just twist those wires, secure that one in place. Then add a few single leaves to the bottom just by popping those in place and just winding that wire around. I then want to do exactly the same on the other side, and again just attach those with a piece of floral tape. Now I've just placed it on my foam mat just so it's a bit softer because they are quite delicate. Now I want to add some leaves in underneath. Now because there are quite a lot of flowers on here, if it is becoming quite hard to start wrapping the tape round, what you can do is just take a length of thin wire and you can use this to secure leaves in place. So I'm just wrapping that round. I'm then going to add my last rose, turn that over, so just rest it on my mat and just wind the wire around. Final thing is just to add any more flower buds. So I'm just going to use a small amount of wire and just first of all wrap it a few times around my flower. Use that wire, secure that against the edge to just poke it through, and I'm just going to add another one just onto this other side. So once all of our flowers, our leaves and our buds have been added, there we have our hoop ready to add to the cake. So as you can see from the back, you just want to make sure that all of your wires are just kept out of sight. So I've just got a 2-tier white cake. So I've got an 8-inch cake on the bottom and a 6-inch cake on the top. Take my floral hoop, and just under this leaf is our flower pick. So I'm going to push this into center of the cake. That flower pick just keeps it nicely in place, and I'm going to go in with a small amount of royal icing, which I've just popped in a piping bag, and just pop that underneath bottom of the hoop, and also underneath the larger rose is sitting against the cake. Now I just want to balance up this bottom section, so I've just got one last leaf, and I'm just going to bend this at a right angle so that it will sit underneath. Now I'm not going to push this into the cake, but I'm going to push it between the cake boards. So I'm just going to push that into place and just secure that wire with a piece of royal icing just on the top. So here we have the finished floral hoop added onto our cake. Now don't forget, I will put a link in the description below to all the rose tutorials and the flower buds. I really hope you've enjoyed this video tutorial and will find it useful if you want to make your own floral hoop. If you have, then don't forget to give this video a like, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, then don't forget you can subscribe to the Cake Spanners YouTube channel. I'll also put a link below to all the tools that I used in today's video. So until next time, bye!